Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Keren Yarhi-Milo. I am the Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs and the Adlai Stevenson Professor of International Relations. When we first planned this discussion, our focus was on the feasibility, theoretical feasibility, and implications of President Trump's 20-point Gaza plan. But the world has shifted dramatically in just the past 36 hours. We now gather under profoundly different and in many ways historic circumstances. Israel and Hamas agreed to begin the first phase of a ceasefire, halting fighting and starting a hostage prisoner exchange in which Hamas will release hostages in Gaza in return for the release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. The first phase of the ceasefire has now started. The IDF has withdrawn to the agreed upon line, and in less than 72 hours, all living hostages should be home. The war in Gaza has exacted an enormous human toll. The loss of life, displacement, and trauma have been devastating. For Israelis, the horror of October 7 and the long captivity of hostages have left deep scars. For the families of hostages who have endured unimaginable anguish, this moment carries both belief and apprehension. It is a collective holding of breath, a fragile, deeply human hope that the promise of return will finally become real. For Palestinians, the utter destruction and unimaginable death toll and suffering of tens of thousands of innocent civilians have been catastrophic and beyond measure. This war has always also intensified political polarization within Israel, among the Palestinians, across the wider Middle East, and all over the world, frankly. If President Trump's 20-point plan is fully implemented, it could mark a truly rare opening for renewed diplomacy and reconstruction, not only between Israelis and Palestinians, but across the broader region. If it falters, it will remind us yet again how challenging peace efforts can be, especially in the Middle East. Now, to help us think through all of these dynamics, today's discussions we will explore many issues, but we will try to focus on four key themes. First, the feasibility. Does the Trump plan create a viable political process, or is it more symbolic than substantive? How do we compare it to past efforts to broker peace? We want to also focus on the practical challenges. What will implementation require? Which portion of the deal are most vulnerable to breakdown and why? We want to look at spoilers and obstacles. How does, the fractured Palestinian politics, Israel's coalition dynamics, elections, regional actors, and the wider climate of mistrust, how did all of those factors shape the odds of success? And we will look at external leverage. How can the United States, Europe, the Arab partners use diplomatic, economic, security tools to really push this plan from declaration towards implementation? So lots to discuss and unpack. We're really lucky to have an amazing panel of experts and practitioners here today to help us make sense of this historic moment. We have Summer Sinjalawi, is the chairman of the Jerusalem Fund and the head of the alliances for the two-state solution. Thank you so much, Summer, for joining us. We have Shira Efron, is a leading expert in Israeli and Middle East affairs, serving as the distinguished RAND Israel policy chair. And she previously served as director of research at the Israeli Policy Forum and has advised Israel's Ministry of Defense and its National Security Council. We have Ambassador Jack Lew, who returned to SIPA earlier this year after serving as U.S. Ambassador to Israel during the Biden administration. He previously served as the 76th Secretary of the Treasury and White House Chief of Staff in the Obama administration. He is the director, as you know, the director of policy at IGP and the professor of international public affairs here at SIPA. Finally, we have Nadav Eyal, who is one of Israel's most prominent journalists and a winner of the Sokolov Award. He writes columns for Yediot, Ahronot, and Ynet, Israel's most widely circulated newspaper and news website, respectively. Nadav is a senior research scholar at IGP and an adjunct professor here at SIPA. And we are also honored to be joined by Mr. Nasser Al-Kidwa. Mr. Al-Kidwa is the former foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority and a veteran statesman with deep experience in negotiation. And he will help us kick off today's discussion. Unfortunately, Mr. Al-Kidwa can only join us for the beginning of our discussion, so we will start with him, and once he departs, we will move to the rest of the panel. Nasser, really good seeing you, good being with you. Thank you so much for joining us. And so as someone who spent decades, really decades, engaged in diplomacy, in negotiations, how do you see the current moment in Gaza? Is this a turning point that could really reshape the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in your opinion?
Okay, thank you. Let me first say that I'm happy to be with you today. And Professor Yarhi, of course, reminded us that Syria remains the most important country in the Eastern Arab region. And indeed, it is so. So we only have to wish all the best to the Syrian people and try to imagine a situation whereby they can overcome all their problems and be ready to assume the natural role of Syria. And I'm saying that not only by way of compliments, but because of the political fact that Syria is indeed an important country in the Middle East. Now, with regard to the our situation, the Palestinian situation, and the terrible situation in Gaza, many call it genocidal war, many call it other things. It doesn't matter how we call it, but it is indeed terrible situation that needed to end. And of course, one has to acknowledge the fact that the engagement of President Trump as the president of the United States of America, the most important country in the world, helped in providing the necessary framework for this. Now you refer to the 20-point plan. I am accustomed to 21-point plan. I don't know where the 1 point went or disappeared, but it's so as another indication of the fluidity of the situation. Now the plan, let's all assume that we can call it that. The plan provides for important things. It provides for an end of the war. It provides for the release of hostages and the exchange of prisoners. It provides for a new era in Gaza. It provides for an end of Hamas governance. It provides for the governance of Gaza, or the so-called the day after. It provides for the end result in a political sense, that is the state of Palestine and the two states. But of course, at the same time, it doesn't have enough meat. It doesn't have enough substance. There's lots of vacancies that could create many obstacles and many difficulties in the way, as we have already seen by the stronger party, that is the government of Israel, the government of Mr. Netanyahu. In any case, we are now looking at the implementation of the first phase, as you said, Professor, rightly. And irrespective of anything, this is good. At least the release of the hostages will bring happiness to many families, will bring happiness to communities, will bring happiness to probably peoples in the Middle East, and it might provide for a better future, a better solutions in the future. So it's better than nothing. There is no doubt about that. But of course, the real trick is to be able to find solutions for what's after, especially the governance of Gaza and the long-term solution, political solution in the form of two states, as we indicated earlier. So now we can assume that the first phase will proceed, will go ahead. We still have the problem of the names of prisoners that would be released, and the main question whether they will include people like Marwan Barghouti and Ahmed Saadat or not. And that, of course, will create an important dynamics. We will see what's going to happen in this regard. But after that, we still have very, very difficult issues to be faced with and to try to solve, including the future of Hamas and the governance of Gaza and things like that. Now, let me say a few things in this regard. With regard to the future of Hamas, the problem in my mind that no one spoke realities with these guys. We have some Arab parties that said things which could be interpreted as possibility of the continuity of the group in their control, security control over Gaza. And on the other side, we have the Israeli government that said things like they have to give up their arms to surrender and leave Gaza. Leave Gaza where to exactly, we don't know. So there is absence of what should be said. And unifying the language in this regard, unifying positions in this regard. I personally think that we should clearly tell Hamas, I mean collectively, the Palestinians, the Arabs, the regional, the international forces, we should clearly tell them that it's a new era and that they have to accept the idea that their rule over Gaza came to an end. And by saying their rule, I mean in all its forms, whether it's political, security, or administrative way. At the same time, I think we have to tell them that there is a road for political transformation, structural transformation, leading to the possibility of forming a new political party that can participate in the political life, in the Palestinian political life. Now, I hear from every now and then, yes, but then no one officially told the Hamas guys something like this. We say things that could be understood different ways, and that is confusing and probably will lead to bad results. So the first thing is to have a unified position that clearly say it's a new era and it's a new beginning, but at the same time it says that we have some future for you if you accept the political equation and you accept what we have said, what we have just said, provided that you can play only a political role without really getting engaged in any military or things related to weapons in any way. Now, of course, we move next to the governance of Gaza, and long time ago we proposed the formation of a Palestinian body that should be organically linked to the Palestinian Authority. And I still think that this is the way forward. At the same time, of course, we can have another body, Arab International, that can supervise the working of the first body that I spoke about. But then we started to hear strange things, such as directly governing Gaza internationally and having a board of directors headed by Mr. Tony Blair or whatever. Come on, I mean, you can't assume, you cannot seriously assume that you can bring a Western guy to govern Gaza after what happened. I mean, this is ridiculous and this is stupid, especially if the guy reminds every Palestinian of the British mandate and the meaning of all that. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So we probably need to take another look at this and start thinking seriously about or of a Palestinian governing body that could be supervised in whatever way the international community would like to. And finally, there is the final solution. There should be a final solution because this is a sine qua non for the stability of the region. And in this regard, I think Mr. Ehud Olmert and myself signed a joint proposal on the 17th of July, on the 30th of July, 31st of July. I forgot the date of 2023. Basically saying that there is no other solution. And it's a good opportunity today to reiterate that there is no other solution. Either we have a solution based on the acceptance, the mutual acceptance of the other side, the acceptance of the national rights of the other side, which means ultimately two-state solution, irrespective of how you do that and irrespective of the relationship between the two states that could take any form up to a confederation. Either you do that or you go the messianic crazy way that says that it's all ours and that we don't accept the national rights and the national even existence of the other side, which means continuity of war and bloodshed and suffering and so on and so forth. I mean, there is no third way. It's either this or that, and I think sane people will have to choose the first one. There is no other way about it, and I'm confident that by the end of the war, everybody on both sides will start thinking their positions and the validity of those positions and how far they were useful and what are the real solutions in this regard. So let's hope that what we have now in hand will develop properly, will develop positively, and let's hope that finally we will start putting our feet on the way towards peace and stability in the region. And let me again thank you for the opportunity and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Mr. Akila, for saying this. And this is exactly the topics that we will now unpack with the rest of the panel. Thank you so much. And we will hope to see you in future events with us. I know you have to drop up. And let me turn to Nadav. Nadav, let's start with you. Can you walk us through what is in the phase one, what is in phase two of this deal? Because Nasser already went into the real problematic issues that are in the phase two. So how confident are you that phase two will actually happen?
Okay, so first of all, where we are at right now is really important to recognize. Israeli forces have withdrawn to the yellow line, the so-called yellow line in the Gaza Strip. This has been finalized by 12 p.m. Israel time, a few hours ago. And that means that all the live hostages are to be released by 12 p.m. on Monday. And I'm saying the live hostages, but the agreement entails all the hostages, including the bodies of the Israelis murdered by Hamas on October 7 that are held by Hamas. However, if you look at the wording of the agreement, and it was published, the agreement itself as to this phase of the Trump plan, you see that there's a lot of words there, and it's quite worrying as to how to trace the bodies, the remains of the Israeli soldiers and Israeli civilian bodies that are in the Gaza Strip. I suspect that this issue is going to become a thing, and it's going to become a challenge here. And there are already suspicions within the Israeli intelligence community that Hamas might be playing with it because it knows that it can use it as leverage. I don't know for sure. I don't think the intelligence community in Israel knows for sure. But this is a big issue. I've been speaking with families of hostages that have died, have been murdered, the bodies taken to Gaza. It's very stressful at times for them, but Israel is bracing itself for the release of these hostages. Now, as to the second phase, this is actually not one deal, but two deals. The first deal is quite straightforward. Israeli IDF is withdrawing about 50%, 53% say the Israelis will be still held by the IDF. There is an exchange. Palestinian prisoners are going to be released. The live Israeli hostages are going to be released. Hamas is going to at least begin retrieving and handing over the bodies of the dead hostages. And that's the first phase. The second phase is clouded. I don't want to say the word mystery, but let's say that there's a lot of constructive vagueness as to, and I think it's intentional, as to the second phase. I'll just give one example, and I'll hand it over to either Summer or Shira or Jack, who want to put more details into this. But the entire issue of arms that is not only crucial to Israel, but also very important, as we just heard from Nasser al-Kidwa, as to the Palestinian Authority and the Fatah and the future of Gaza. How will this be? I've heard at least 3 different versions of that piece of agreement as to what's going to happen with the arms. The arms will be frozen, will be held by the Palestinian police of Gaza. What's that Palestinian police? The past Palestinian police of Gaza is Hamas. How is this going to happen? What kind of arms? I've heard 3 conflicting versions as to that. Light arms, as I just had former Prime Minister Ehud Barak on my class in Colombia, and when asked about collecting arms in Gaza, he said, we didn't even manage to collect the arms in the West Bank. We're not managing to collect the arms in the Bedouin population in the Negev. Do you really think that any force will be able to collect the light arms, the Kalashnikovs and AR-15 in the Gaza Strip? So there are big questions there. Prime Minister Netanyahu has just said a few hours ago, Gaza will be demilitarized and Hamas will be disarmed one way or the other, which I read as opening a window for a possible escalation, or at least a threat to that. I don't think President Trump is going to allow that to happen.
Very interesting.
I'll leave it at this and let other people to chip in.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot in the phase 2 that we want to discuss, but just for a second, I want to turn to Shira to, what has the reaction been in Israel to this? Is it different from previous announcements of ceasefires and hostage releases? Can you share a bit?
So I'm outside of the country at the moment, so I can't share the response, but I just looking at, social media and speaking with my social circles, and this is very different because this is, the end of the war. And you should see the happiness on people seeing soldiers finally getting out of Gaza and not going into Gaza. Right? This is something we haven't seen in a long time. Obviously, hostages are returning, and those are the live hostages, the last ones remaining in Gaza. The remains, I agree with Nadav. I think it's going to be an issue, and an issue that we had anticipated. For a long time, it was very clear that we're going to get to this moment where the Hamas plays games where they really don't know, but it's an issue. But this is real relief, and I'm sure Summer will speak about it. But it's this respite that both people really needed. This is a brutal, painful war, and its implications are going to be felt for generations for both Israelis and Gazans. But if you don't mind, I just want to say a few things about what Nadav said. I agree with everything. I'm going to put a little bit more meat on the bones because I think it's not phase 2. As we're talking about, it's phase 1 and phase 2. Yes. First of all, when you talk about disarmament, right? It's there's a whole framework that speaks about it's very it's an academia, so we can be geeky about it. But this whole concept of DDR, right? Disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of good precedents. So when we look around, the sort of the Northern Ireland model is a successful one, but we look at Hezbollah and we look at Boko Haram and we look at the Taliban and we look at Islamist organizations. it has never worked, in fact.
Mhm.
And it has never worked for a variety of reasons. It usually does not work by force. It has to be a voluntary process. A voluntary process will require intra-Palestinian understandings. This is for Summer to discuss, but it's going to be very, very challenging. Also, what does for Hamas mean laying down their arms? Is it allowed by their belief system, or they're allowed just to retreat only to come back? For our Americans listeners, you probably remember that the Taliban used to say, you Americans have the clocks, but we have the time. For Hamas, it's the same mindset. So this is one thing. The second thing is that as I'm looking now at Gaza, I'm saying, okay, Hamas is already deployed also
Right.
very quickly, also as expected. The IDF is around there. There's Palestinian Islamic Jihad, different armed clans, and now there's supposed to be a Palestinian force to come in and some sort of a multinational force. So in a territory of 141 square kilometers, we're going to have between 4 to 6 different forces. How is this going to be ran, and the Board of Peace will run them? I think this is very complicated. We have to speak about these details and how, and now is the time to plan. And another thing that I think we have to discuss, the contours of this plan resemble many other plans, and that's to me a good thing, right? If everyone plays the same melody, it means there's something to it. However, everyone knew this is going to come, but no one did the preparatory work. So I'll give you an example. According to US officials, and Ambassador Liu may want to comment on that, training, vetting a proper Palestinian force of a good number of thousands, not 200, 150 in Egypt, what we heard of so far, is estimated at 18 months. Do we have 18 months now? And unfortunately, I think this is going to be a very bumpy road. I just hope that the two sides, unlike their natural inclination, will negotiate in good faith. Because any reason there remains not being found, Israel scrambling and not being able to facilitate 600 trucks, and they will not be able to facilitate 600 trucks a day. They weren't able to facilitate in the last ceasefire as well, because the UN doesn't have 600 trucks. Anything can break this agreement apart, but the idea here is, so the main thing would be the good faith of the parties themselves, whether voluntary or forced and pressured.
Right. No, that is very important. Tough negotiations and bargaining ahead. I want to bring in Summer for Summer. You published an op-ed yesterday in the New York Times where you cautioned that the real political work needs to start now, and it's a lot of work, as you said. Can you elaborate on that, and can you comment on some of the things that this came up in the conversation from Shira and Nadav about some of the practical things that need to be hammered out?
Thank you so much. Well, I don't underestimate the importance of the breakthrough that has happened. And I think if President Trump managed to take it to success in all its phases in the coming year, I think both us, Israelis and Palestinians, should campaign to nominate him to the Nobel Peace Prize. It's not going to be an easy job. We may achieve ceasefire, but I think we're still far away from peace. What has happened in the last 72 hours is that there was an opportunity for peace again, some kind of hope for peace again, but it needs a lot of work. And what I always try to shed lights on in what I say and what I write is that peace is not necessarily only shutting the guns. Peace is not only kicking a process of reconstruction. I mean, it's not only steel and concrete. The most of the damage that has happened during this conflict is in the souls, in the hearts and the minds of the Israelis and Palestinians. And nobody is trying to fix this. We can reconstruct Gaza, but we need to rebirth the Palestinian people. And we need to rebirth also the Israeli people. We need to introduce a new way of thinking in this conflict. If not, we will not be able to achieve anything. Everything that has been mentioned here, I totally agree with. I mean, everybody is talking now about the demilitarized Palestinian state, the D word. Well, I think I agree, but it's not only one D, it should be 3 Ds. This Palestinian state should be demilitarized, democratic, and developed. If we will underestimate one of these elements, this state will not be sustainable. It will not be sustainable to be able to coexist with Israel, which is OECD country, startup nation, a very nice democracy. Some parity should be created between the two states in order that these two states can survive long term together. But also, nobody is talking about how can we a little bit defeat the hard feelings inside the hearts and the minds of the Israelis and Palestinians. The main challenge here is that there is a lot of hatred. I can see it because it's not that I am able to see this conflict in the eyes of Palestinians. It's also maybe I am one of the very rare people that are able to see it in the eyes of the Israelis also. I meet an average of 200, 300 Israelis a week, and I speak with Israel from wall to wall, left, center, right, Haredi, secular, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, all types of Israelis. And I can see how we both have in common a cocktail of hard feelings that are conquering our hearts. And any peace process that does not address these issues will not succeed. I always say that we have been since 1967 one Israeli elections away from peace. All what we need to do is being able to convince 51% of the Israelis in the coming election to vote for peace. And unfortunately, it's only us, the Palestinians, who can convince them that they can take this kamikaze jump and trust the Palestinians. It's only us. So a change is needed from the Palestinian side. It needs to be transferred in messages to the Israeli side, touch their hearts and minds, and then we can see what will be the test in the coming elections. In this, nobody is trying to invest anything. Nobody is trying to address these issues. And I keep trying to raise the importance on working on that level, on that human level of the conflict. Now, I will end by saying something. Today, October 2025, is very much similar to October 2023. In October 2023, all of us did have the needed information about the intention of Hamas. We see them training. Even Sinwar publicly spoke about the 7th of October and his plans. We see them develop their arms, their rockets. Everybody saw the information, but we lacked imagination. We didn't imagine they will be able to do it. Today, everybody has enough information about the importance of peace, that the region is ready to integrate Israel, that the Prime Minister of Indonesia clearly declared this, the Saudis want to achieve this, but nobody is helping us, Israelis and Palestinians, to imagine peace. There is a lack of imagination among Israelis and Palestinians. And we need to deliver strong messages for Palestinians and for Israelis. For Israelis, we need to tell them, why do you want to shed tears if they will not now allow you to participate in the UEFA? Why do you need to play football in Europe? Why do you need to shed tears if they are not going to allow you to participate in the Eurovision? Your place is not Europe. Your place is in the Middle East. You need to play football in the Middle East. You need to be part of Arab Idol and not the Eurovision. Start thinking as part of the Middle East. So we need to push these imaginations among Israelis and Palestinians. It will help a lot any political process like the one that was introduced by President Trump.
Thank you so much, Summer. There's a lot to unpack. We could just do a webinar just on understanding what are really the conditions for successful lasting peace and what are the factors that we've ignored in past attempts to get there. So let me turn now to Ambassador Liu. So Jack, what do you make of the 20-point plan? And especially if you compare it to past attempts at achieving this kind of a deal and an end of the war? What do you see different? What do you see similar? And how worried are you about the lack of specifics and details around the implementation, especially of phase 2, but some aspects of phase 1?
Thanks, Karen. Before getting to the difficulties, which are many, I think I have to begin by saying how remarkable it is to get an agreement and for phase 1 to now be something that's in the implementation stage. There has been no point since October 7th until now when there has been even a glimmer of a possibility of getting all the living hostages out. And now we're saying we expect all the living hostages to be out by Monday. That's enormous. I agree with all the comments that were made about the challenges about the remains of the deceased hostages. I think we have to assume that there are a combination of things that are all real. In the rubble, it's going to be hard to identify where all the remains are. There may not be fully a good spirit to find them all, and there may be some desire to hold some back. I don't think that is something that should be seen as a reason to believe that phase 1 isn't real. When those 20 hostages come home in the next 72 hours, something will change in the hearts and minds of people in Israel and around the world who have appropriately been transfixed on bringing those people home. And I think you have to ask, how did that happen? As somebody who is not want to give a lot of praise to the policies of the current administration, I have to say that the disruptive personality that the President of the United States brought to this got all the parties in the process to do something that they couldn't and wouldn't otherwise have done. Now, that actually has, I think, implications on how do you deal with all the challenges that I'm going to talk about for a couple of minutes. I think it's going to take sustained focus by the President of the United States, the government of the United States, all the instrumentalities of the United States, in order for there to be a pathway to complete phase 1 and get into phase 2 and then phase 3. This can't be something that is today's kind of bright object that we then move on and don't put that level of focus on, because I don't believe that it would happen without the United States staying laser focused. Yep. And that means that all the parties have to know that there are consequences if they don't continue in the process and solve problems as they come up. Because I'm going to go through things that are all hard, and they all involve technical work, and in my experience, day and night, every day of the week work. It's not a one-day kind of thing. So you look at, we talked in phase 1, the obstacle of will there be a possibility of returning all the remains? I think there has to be a willingness on both sides to accept that that's going to be a process that takes time, and it won't probably be satisfactory from an Israeli perspective. It won't give comfort to all the families right away. But it can't be tolerated if there's not a good faith effort. That has to be recognized as breach of the agreement. And it's not as if there's a hard line between the two, because the 20 points don't say where that hard line is, because I'm not sure there's anyone who knows exactly where the hard line is between possibility and will. You know, when you get to the issue of prisoners, I'm not sure that they've had a final agreement on who all the prisoners are.
Right.
We're talking about the hardest prisoners to release, the ones who have the most blood on their hands. And that's going to have to happen. And that's going to require keeping all the parties focused. In order to get to phase 2, there's going to have to be an agreement to accept an interim governance arrangement in Gaza. And with respect to Nasser al-Kidwa's observations about the long-term need for there being Palestinian control of the governance, the fact that you have all the Arab countries, the international community, the United States and Israel all embracing this concept of the agreement and the 20 points, it has to be given a chance. There has to be Palestinian representation in that. But what are they going to do when they hit the ground? There are going to be guns. The point that was made about not being able to remove all the guns is very real. There's going to have to be some kind of a security force. I think Shira's point about how long it will take to train a Palestinian police force, I've always thought you could speed that up a little bit, but it's not tomorrow. It's measured in months, hopefully not years. That means some international forces will have to be there. I think the 20 points had in it a provision that was in one of the more different provisions than what we saw a year ago, when a lot of these principles were hammered out in the negotiations that we were part of. It says that if there isn't the ability for the international force to have control over all of Gaza, then it is in effect wherever there is control. That kind of severability means that you can start making progress. Now, I'm going to address one more issue, because I think, Samer, you put your finger on where the long-term solution is. There has to be a kind of trust built up. That trust will only be built up if we start to see things happen when the schools open up in tents in Gaza. Will they use a curriculum that doesn't teach anti-Semitic hatred? I think that's possible. If that's possible, that's a confidence-building measure. That can have a penumbral effect on building trust more broadly between Israelis and Palestinians. If it can't happen in that context, it will have the opposite effect. I'm an optimist. I think it can happen. Can you find people? I think there are thousands of people in Gaza who've had public service jobs who are acceptable in terms of their not being part of Hamas, who can be part of a transitional governance. Get that up and running. And finally, the new generation of leadership that comes with possibility into the process. Can you get all the way to phase 3? I think you have to. I don't know that there's a better solution, but it's only going to happen if confidence is built along the way.
Thank you, Jack. Nadav, I wanna turn to you, because this is all happening in a way that many, even in Israel, said for many years. Bibi will not want to have an end of the war, and will not want to negotiate while he's withdrawing forces. And we're also in Israel going into, this is becoming an election year. And so let's talk a little bit about how this all intersects with the domestic politics and his right-wing coalition. And what do you make of it? And do you see significant impediments to making more progress with the current government as we move to the difficult decisions in the phase 2 part?
Yeah, I agree with everything Jack just said, and I want to underline a few points about the 21 points of President Trump that I think are truly very important in terms of bringing a reality check to all the actors in the Middle East, including Israel. First of all, the idea that Hamas will disarm. This is a very important idea. It's a very important idea in principle, because it leads the Palestinian arena into a situation in which you might have one actor, or at least a unified actor, with the inner balances that Samer and Nasser al-Kidwa discussed earlier. But it's crucial. One cannot have an agreement or a pathway to Palestinian statehood without having one armed actor, really. And this is something that was used by the Israeli extreme right, far right, in order to argue that there is no point in having negotiations, and not only by the extreme right in Israel, to the extreme right in Israel. And by the way, again, not only to the extreme right, also to the hardcore right, to sometimes the Likud right. This plan of President Trump says there's going to be a path to Palestinian statehood. So for the first time in many years, Prime Minister Netanyahu has recommitted himself personally to this path. Now, it's true that President Trump recognized Netanyahu's opposition to that idea, while Netanyahu allegedly agreed to the plan. In other words, this looks empty. And judging by the Israeli political sentiment right now, if someone is imagining that we're going to have an agreement from any Israeli government in the next few years to a Palestinian state, right now I don't see any sort of acknowledgement of that, of political sentiment with Israelis. rejecting all ideas of forced migration or transfer of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. Not only that, but according to the agreement, we're learning more details. Palestinians that are abroad will be able to return back to the Gaza Strip. There's a significant number that has left during the war, I think about 100,000. That's also meaningful. And Palestinians will be able to leave Gaza with the promise that they'll be able to return. So that builds a framework for the future. For Netanyahu, Netanyahu absolutely presents this, pitches this as a huge Israeli victory. And by the way, this wasn't a necessity. He could have said, look, this is a very difficult agreement. I want to maintain my relationship strategically with the United States. I'm taking responsibility here. I want to get the hostages back home. It's a difficult agreement to swallow, but this is what we need to do. He could have chosen this political path. He has chosen to portray it as a victory to Israel. And one can understand why. The IDF is still in Gaza. And all the hostages, the live hostages, are supposed to be back home. It's something that Hamas ruled out completely for 2 years. Completely. And it is a victory to an Israeli stance. And also, in principle, the idea that Hamas will disarm. The movement has said again and again that they will never disarm. Now, we still, again, the details are still clouded. So he's pitching this as I have delivered. He is also, now, I think that politically it's helpful for him towards the elections. I always wrote and thought right after the Iran war that it is the interest of the prime minister to get a hostage deal, not to extend the war. I thought this was just people, usually abroad, but not only abroad, trying to overanalyze Netanyahu. Netanyahu wanted to win the war and get the hostages back. And if he couldn't get that, he would, litigate the war endlessly. But he wanted to win. And as far as he's concerned, this is what he's going to do. I think that beyond making political gains here, and he's already making them. I'm seeing polls, okay, Channel 13 and others, he's making political gains. But beyond that, it's very important for the narrative of the Israelis in order to achieve reconciliation down the route to believe that they have won this. It is the sentiment of winning after being defeated on October 7th morning that can lead the Israeli society into the path of reconciliation. And I know that Hamas presents this. How Hamas presents this, I'm hearing what Hamas is saying. We have survived. We have kept our sovereignty. There is no expulsion of Palestinians. And they're saying, look at Hezbollah. This is not they're saying on the record. Look at Hezbollah, look at Iran. Look how much time it took Israel to defeat them, sometimes with no agreement. Now they have had to go to Cairo to sit in the same room with Hamas, basically, or almost, and to agree to an agreement with Hamas after they tried to assassinate us. We have, in other words, endured. And our battle of Sumud has been successful. And this is also important that Hamas can make that pitch.
This is fascinating. Shira, so you wrote an article in Foreign Affairs last month, and you laid out a path for Israel to use the surge of Palestinian statehood recognition to its advantage. Now with the deal, with the phase 2, with the beginning of talking about a pathway toward a Palestinian state, that was something that the Saudis have always said it should be part or is a necessary condition to normalization. Do you think this is possible in this climate now?
So I'm happy to be, sort of more positive, because I agree with Jack. This is just enough of a reason to celebrate where we are today compared to where we've been in the last 24 months. Just in the interest of time, I won't go into those pieces. I think that what I'm seeing in polling, and it's very interesting, it's polling fresh from today, that if you look at these, there's around 50% of the Israeli public still supports the partition from the Palestinians. So either in an agreement or a partition. So in the spirit of the moment, making partition great again, this concept, I think, is resonating with Israelis. And think about it, this is after years of no peace process, when all the forces are working against it. So with a glimmer of hope, you can get those numbers up. So this is among the public. And that's why I just don't buy this whole idea that Israelis are not this and no leader is willing to go for it. And I think if President Trump succeeds in that, right? We're not going to have Mohammed bin Salman or an Arab leader in the Knesset, but with Trump bringing the Arabs behind him next week to Israel, I think that creates a momentum that Israelis want to see, because the yearn is to integrate in the region, right? And this was the main achievement of the Abraham Accords. So this is one thing on that. The second thing that I think is very, very important is, all these like victory narrative, which I agree with Nadav, but in practice, right, none of what this government sold to the Israeli public, right? Real estate, taking over settlements, annexation. I mean, none of that is happening, and we're seeing a pathway toward something, Palestinian agency. And also this veto on the Palestinian Authority, because I'll tell you a secret, and probably Ambassador Lou remembers this. I mean, it started in the previous ceasefire, and this is the plan for today. Who do you think is going to man the Rafah crossing that is now opening? Is the Palestinian Security Force with a very big flag and in uniform. And it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell approach. And Israelis, the sky doesn't fall. And we're going to have the monetary authority because no one else can issue cash assistance vouchers through the UN, only through the Bank of Palestine, because this is how it works. And the water authority still fixes pipes, right? Summer, when I'm talking about the institutions. And the Ministry of Health, that the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah manages the referral part and the procurement of medicine. We're going to see a lot of this. And I think this is when we talk about a pathway. Sorry, Jack, you're
muted, Jack. What did you
Those
say?
are the thousands of people that are
Right.
acceptable. Yeah.
So I'm saying, and I think this is exactly those things that we're going to take it like step by step and just showing that there is a pathway, in fact, and it's doable, and that's why I don't buy as much sort of the red lines, and where the Israeli public is, because Nadav is an expert on Israeli public opinion, probably better than I am, and Israeli politics. But I think things can become more trendy and more appealing to Israelis, and the mood can change very, very quickly, which is a good thing. So, there is a path forward, and if the assumption is that the Arabs from the Gulf will underwrite this whole thing, whether with troops or with money, they are very adamant. The Saudis are very adamant, and they're not backing. They're doubling down on a political horizon for the Palestinians, and they're backing the Palestinian Authority, Summer, with all its faults. They're backing the institutions and the leadership for now, but mainly it's the institutions. I'll stop here.
Thanks. So, Summer, do you want to respond to this from your perspective? Do you agree with this assessment? What concerns you in this, in the way that we've kind of laid out the pathway?
Well, whenever I talk about Palestinian elections and the importance of changing Palestinian leadership, first of all, I receive the answers, this is internal politics. Fine. But also the change of the curriculum is internal politics. Also the payment of salaries for the prisoners is internal politics. You cannot pick and choose. We need a comprehensive reform. It should include the reform in the education. It should include the reform on the payments. It should include the democratic reform. So you cannot say that we are interfering in 90% of the issue. Just the issue of changing the leadership, we are leaving it. And then they will tell me, well, listen, this car does not have 4 wheels, and you are asking us to change the color of the car. We need to put 4 wheels. The leadership is not the color of the car. The leadership is the engine. You will put 4 wheels, and then you will discover you are not able to move this car. I agree totally with Secretary Jacques Lou when he talked about the reforms on the curriculum. But I would like to say something. Maybe this current leadership will be able to change the curriculum. This current leadership will not be able to change the discussion in the classroom. It's going to change the book, not the culture, because these leadership is totally disconnected from the street. Unpopular leadership cannot force unpopular change. You need agency. You need Palestinians who have volcano in their hearts, that they know that we need to rebirth the Palestinian people. that they know we need to do contradictional statements, that they know we need to do changes. Starting before and more important than changing the curriculum, changing the Palestinian narrative. Until now, we don't recognize the historical links of Jews in this land. And I don't understand it. The biggest chapter in Islam, Surah Al-Baqarah, documents the history of Jews in this land in the most details possible. Maybe in no other holy book. We can read it. We can see it. 3,500 years of history. Why do I need to deny it? I need to recognize the historical rights of Jews, reminding them that they have never been alone. There was always others, and these others are us. So the question here will not continue to be who belongs and who does not belong. The question will start being how do we both belong? It needs to start from there. And there is more painful changes that needs to be done. For example, redefining the right of return. We need to be so honest and tell the Palestinian people the right of return means the right of return to the state of Palestine. Because if there is only one reason for any Israeli to withdraw from the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, it's because they need to live in a Jewish democratic state. I cannot create two-state solution and flood Israel with 5 million refugees, Palestinian refugees. It doesn't work like this. And if they start saying that this is individual right and nobody has the agency to give up an individual right, this is not correct. If I am elected democratically, I have the agency to give up individual rights for the sake of the benefit of the collective. Governments do this. With this kind of leadership, we are not going to move now with Abbas. We are not going to move from one place to another place. We need to start with elections. And through elections, we are going to defeat Hamas. The real defeat of Hamas comes in the election boxes. If we do elections before the Israeli elections and we defeat Hamas and we get up some kind of a Ben Gurion, a Palestinian Ben Gurion, that understand that he needs to activate the Al-Talena option, nobody will be able to demilitarize Hamas or any other Palestinian faction. So we need to start thinking deeply, encouraging the change from those who are trying to voice it out inside the Palestinian society, endorse them, and help the Israelis and Palestinians to have this change from inside the society. There is a road to the peace in the Middle East, but it's not only via Washington. It's not only via Riyadh. It should go through Tel Aviv, Ramallah, Zichron Yaakov, Rishon LeZion, Nablus, Bethlehem, every Israeli and Palestinian city. And we need to focus there.
Summer, this is an important conversation to have, and I'm glad that we're only beginning to have this. I want to end because there's just a lot that we would want to do, specifically talking about the pathway to a Palestinian state and what's the political horizons. But this is a big achievement of the President Trump and the Trump administration. Jack, you mentioned this and you know from experience. So I want us to just, if you can leave us with a kind of a very quick analysis of the role of how do we make sure, or how can people make sure that this administration stays committed to this, and what is the role of countries now that we saw Qatar is playing a very significant role. We have Turkey now playing a very important role that it did not play before. We have obviously other Arab countries joining in. Can you talk a little bit about this regional coalition and the Trump administration's being willing to continue to lead with this and commit to this?
Well, I think by making the commitment to send 200 U.S. military troops over to play a support role, it is a need for the U.S. to stay engaged. I've seen what 200 U.S. military can do to build a deconfliction zone where people who couldn't talk to each other before can make sure that they stay out of each other's way and bad things don't happen. I think that once you have a situation like in Lebanon, where U.S. military are working day and night to coordinate on the ground to try and keep the number of things that are problems from occurring, that's going to take place at a CENTCOM level. That's going to take place in the worker level. At the upper level, you need to have all leaders staying engaged so that they're focusing on the horizon and holding the people on the ground responsible day to day to say, if there's a problem, solve it. It's not enough to say there's a problem. And, I Samer's distinction between agency in the country and the role of the U.S., all the U.S. can do is make it possible for the agency of people who live there to express itself. It's not a replacement for it. All the international group can do is make it possible. I think if there were elections in the West Bank that reflected a sense of hope coming out of small steps being made in Gaza, that would be just an enormous accomplishment. I don't think that happens if the U.S. doesn't engage, because I don't think that there's other glue between all of the different players. I think the point that was made earlier about it being in everyone's interest is hugely important. It's in Israel's interest, it's in Saudi Arabia's interest, it's in the UAE interest, it's in Egypt and Jordan's interest, it's in the U.S. interest. I just hope that the question you asked that I can't answer is, how do you keep the focus there? Just relentless reminding that we need you there. And frankly, it's going to be a willingness to show what the consequences of being a spoiler are. If spoiler behavior is tolerated easily, then it will proliferate. I think that's where the president's kind of personality and character are an advantage here. I don't think anyone thinks he tolerates people who cross him personally very lightly. I worked for 3 presidents who had a reputation for kind of being easier to deal with. Let something good come of that personality.
Yeah. Okay, so unfortunately we're at time. There is so much to discuss, but I have to say this is a historic, potentially transformative moment for the region. We're all hopeful that we will keep hearing good news about progress and release of hostages and the end of the fighting, and that we can come back here and talk about other related questions that we already started to talk about, the political horizon of a 2-state solution and other arrangements. I want to really thank our panelists for taking the time for their incredible analysis, and for everybody who joined us and tuned in. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in IGP future events. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Sama.
Shalom.